I'd like to call this meeting of the West South Milwaukee School Board to order. Mr. Sikich, please lead us in the pledge.
With our new interior design, flag is over here in front.
Yep.
Pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Suzette, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Burns,
Present.
Mr. Becker,
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser. Here. Mr. Keller.
Here.
Ms. Deal. Here. Mrs. Carr is excused. Mr. Sikich,
Present.
Mrs. Lee. Present. And President Lee.
Here, proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any modifications to the agenda this evening?
We have no modifications.
Dylan.
Can you hear me? We have no modifications this evening.
Go ahead, Superintendent.
Okay, thank you. We have no modifications. Okay, so then I will go on to the superintendent's report. We'll start with the legislative update. I am out of town at a conference, which I'll talk about in the updates and information items, but I'll start with the legislative update. So voters approve 79% of school referenda. So preliminary numbers from last week's election show Wisconsin voters approved 79% or 64 questions passed, 17 failed of the school funding referendums on the ballot. Debt referendum questions led the way with 82% pass rate, 32 passed, 7 failed. And non-recurring referendums to exceed the revenue limit had a 75% pass rate. And finally, 11 referendum questions to exceed the revenue limit on a recurring basis passed, while 3 failed, so 79% pass rate. And there's a link there to all of the results. So Evers, Johnson, Call reelected. The Democrats beat back GOP attempt at a veto-proof majority in the assembly. So Democratic Governor Tony Evers bucked recent history in winning re-election with his party in the White House. The Democrats blocked GOP attempts to get a veto-proof majority despite Republican gains in the legislature. Wisconsin politics is reporting Voss. So Speaker Voss offers to boost public school funding in return for, quote, universal school choice. So Robin Voss, fresh off his re-election as Assembly Speaker, says he's willing to boost education funding as Tony Evers wants, but in exchange for an agreement to universal school choice. Voss told reporters that he hasn't yet defined what universal choice would entail. The state has 3 voucher programs for Milwaukee, Racine, and statewide that include income restrictions. There's also a limit in the statewide program on the percentage of a school district's students that can participate. And that limit is scheduled to hit 10% in the 25-26 school year before there is no longer a cap. As Voss said, he planned to talk to his caucus to reach consensus before engaging the Senate and possibly on Governor Evers, who is the former state school superintendent. So we're going to watch that one really closely in terms of how that starts to move and its potential impact on funding for our schools. Then I'll go on to district recognitions. Just a couple this week. So from the superintendent's office, this week was National School Psychologist Week. And so I want to say thank you to all of our school psychologists. Our school psychologists apply expertise in mental health, learning, and behavior to support our students academically, socially, behaviorally, and emotionally. And I want to thank everybody that commits to that part of the work. Additionally, November 18th is Substitute Appreciation Day. And I want to acknowledge all of our committed substitute teachers. We've been working really hard, or it really is Human Resources has been working really hard to let them know they're appreciated. They're a part of our team with regular outreach. And even though we struggle with substitutes, we're doing a better job this year than we have in the past because of part of those efforts. From Walker Elementary, thank you to Morgan Noster and Jane Robinson and the Walker Student Council for organizing and facilitating our Veterans Day Assembly. The co-advisors and the students put a lot of time and effort into making this event a huge success. So thank you to them. At Dotke, congratulations to Dotke PBL High School for being awarded a $2,000 Wisconsin State PTA grant. The application was for funds around the topic of mental health. In October, one of Dotke's pitches during their all-school project was to create and run a community mental health fair. The student group will now get to turn their idea into reality with these funds, so stay tuned for more information on the fair. And then in some updates and information items for me, and this one is a little longer than usual. First, a response to public comments is where we always start. So there was one comment at a regular school board meeting on October 24th regarding the offer to purchase Lane Intermediate School and a request for the board to consider that offer. And as I've shared previously, as advised by our attorney, there was no need for that consideration given the property was never listed for sale. And since this meeting on October 24th, the board made a decision regarding the use of Lane. There were similar public comments made by 3 members of the public at the special school board meeting on October 31st. Some of these were addressed during that meeting. And since the decision the board made about Lane, there's only been feedback in support of a recreation facility on the west side of our communities. And we're looking forward to taking the next step with recreation regarding the planning around Lane. As I've been doing some school consolidation updates. So we completed our first round of staff meetings in each of the schools that will consolidate or receive new students next year. So these meetings were very helpful. Like most large organizational changes, it is difficult to think of all the questions or needs those being impacted will have unless you go and ask. So we did have questions come up that are things we had not previously considered. And we're adjusting our planning accordingly as the process moved forward. So I want to thank all the staff members that gave morning meeting time to this effort and provided feedback about how we can better move forward together as we work through that process. I reported on October 24th that we had an upcoming meeting with the city of West Allis regarding vacant buildings. So that meeting was held. That was a very productive conversation as we move into brainstorming options for Longfellow and other vacant parcels. Remember, we have a number of vacant plots of land, as well as the vacant buildings that become part of this consolidation process. So the next steps will include a meeting with a group of students at Longfellow who have some ideas to share about what to do with Longfellow, and that's going to be my next step. And that'll be followed by a neighborhood meeting to brainstorm options and prioritize what neighbors would like to see the Longfellow property be used for. And then, as I also shared earlier, then we will come back to our school board with the feedback and seek direction on next steps. In terms of Madison, I'm going to comment that on our thoughts about that a little more specifically in a moment. It's tied to the conference I'm at this evening. So a couple other updates. I shared that I'm playing percussion with our intermediate school students, or at least I'm trying. I'm a bit nervous about the upcoming concerts. 2 of them are this week. But I received a number of emails from students thanking me for sharing my time in this way. And I've responded to each one of them. But here's one of the email I just enjoyed and I wanted to share it this evening. So it starts, "Dear Dr. Lexman, thank you for coming to our class to play songs with us. I love my orchestra class. I'm excited for the concert next week. It's going to be so much fun. I started playing the violin when I was in 2nd grade. I'm glad you like orchestra because I like orchestra too. I also play the ukulele and piano. And it's just one of dozens that I've received. So this is making this part of the year so much fun. So in terms of where I am this evening, I'm out of town at an interesting conference with a focus on educational technology, both the infrastructure and the cybersecurity side, as well as the use of technology to really support instruction and academic achievement. So first of all, these are really cost-effective opportunities. I've attended some of these in the past. Deidre has, Steve Eichmann has, when they focus on facilities. And it's a design of a conference where there are no registration costs, and the conference provider covers the cost of hotel and meals. And the reason they're able to do that is because we have direct meetings with potential vendors. So the vendors pick up part of the cost. So the only cost for our districts for this style of conference are flights and ground transportation, just so I'm kind of clear and transparent with everybody. But what I've been learning on the cybersecurity side, it's something that all districts are trying to figure out, which is, how to train employees not to click on suspicious emails, which puts our networks at risk. right? And so there was a district that did a presentation about what they're doing when an employee fails a phishing test. So we do these regularly, the phishing tests, and honestly, I failed one this past summer. Well, the district that was presenting then immediately requires a follow-up training via video. So that for myself, for example, this past summer, then I would have received an email like, you need to see this video and go through a video training again. And then this district shared that if they fail another test, then they're required to participate in a group face-to-face training. So during that presentation, I was actually emailing Kevin Clark and Aaron Norris during the presentation, and they're already exploring these options with our current training platform, which is know before you go. And then we're also exploring then what that means to follow up even with a face-to-face. So it's an example of some really powerful learning. It's an idea we just hadn't thought of that I'm taking away, we're already taking action on. And then on the educational technology side, one of the things I've been exploring here are advanced technologies that might one day be part of the vision that we're developing for Madison as what we're calling an innovation center. So the vision for the innovation center is to house in one place the advanced technologies and equipment needed to support very specialized career-focused courses, and to house specialized tools and equipment there to support more advanced student projects for project-based learning. So this vision also includes then a number of build spaces or build labs that teachers then could sign out and use with entire classes to support project-based learning that need specialized tools or that get really messy in terms of the builds. And some of the projects we're seeing require space and equipment that we can't replicate in each school because it's so expensive. So having one center that supports this can be powerful and a fiscally responsible way to advance our strategic plan. So one specific example from today is a platform focused on anatomy and physiology that provides 3D visualizations of anatomical structures. So they were doing full human anatomy and physiology. They were doing frog dissections in 3D, but they went further. And they presented the platform on many different devices, including devices that all of our students have. But then they showed us this particular 3D visualization platform on a great big interactive touch screen, but the touch screen was laid flat and it was the size of an operating table. And so we could all stand around and watch this dissection happen kind of in 3D as if you're at an operating table. So I was impressed. It was a bit odd to me, but it is where technology and education are going. And I'm really very excited about bringing something like this back to our students. But here's the thing, it's expensive investment. So rather than a model where we would have this in each school because it's so expensive, our idea is to focus on one high-end implementation of these kinds of tools in an innovation center where then all students can have access. So I thought it was an interesting connection between kind of the school consolidation and what we're starting to envision for what might be a use for Madison, and a connection into what might come next as a result of being at a conference like this. So I wanted to share a bit more detail in the update, just because I believe that conferences like this are not only cost effective for us, but it's been time really well spent. So I thank you for that, and that concludes the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 7, our public comment section. So as a reminder, if you'd like to sign up for public comments and you're on Zoom, there is a link in the chat to do so. Before you start your public comments, if you would please start by stating your name and your address, and you will have 3 minutes to address the board. There will not be any back and forth as far as answering questions or discussion, but if there's a simple matter that can be addressed immediately after the comments are completed, we will do that. So looking at the list, we have here 2 people signed up. The first one is Mr. Dan Bailey. I do not see him here in person, and I didn't see him online, but I will check again. We were uncertain if Mr. Bailey was simply leaving a comment in general or if he was actually interested in speaking this evening. Just wait a few seconds in case he is getting online. He is not here in person. Seeing he's not here, we'll keep an eye out, but we'll move on to our next speaker, Mr. Steve Broadwell.
Steve Broadwell, 12965 West Ohio Court, New Berlin. You have acknowledged my observation regarding the district's encouragement of our kids to participate in social justice community activism. If they aren't aware of the problems the world faces as progressives perceive them, the district seems determined to enlighten them. You indoctrinate ever younger children and teachers into your belief system using SEL obedience training to create your army of child activists. This blatant indoctrination is evident in a book the district provided to Hale and Central teachers called Mathematics Lessons to Explore, Understand, and Respond to Social Injustice. When reading this, one gets the impression that math is secondary to creating woke child activists. Here's a small sampling of lessons from the book, each first stating a social issue as its premise from a leftist perspective, which is then supported by a math lesson that follows. One on climate change states as fact that climate change is real, pointing to humans as the cause. Once students acknowledge their impact on climate change, discussions shift to mitigation and adaptation, which are important constructs for the students to understand as they begin action. Several involving race have students explore the growth of income equality by race over time, disproportionate incarceration rates, and whites calling the police on blacks, which are all due to, of course, conscious and obvious racism. Note the letter B is always capitalized when mentioning blacks, but the W in whites is always lowercase. The reason, quoting one of the authors, is to challenge the ways that these standard grammar conventions reinforce systems of privilege and oppression. I don't know what that means. Yet another introduces kids to Listen to Glisten, which is the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Network School Climate Report that details the ways that students who identify as LGBTQ+ are being mistreated in schools. Each lesson concludes with a taking action section that provides possible activism activities for the teacher to introduce to the students. There's even a section that instructs teachers how to anticipate and plan for backlash that might come from parents during or after the lesson. The authors realize that these are not family-friendly lessons for those not sharing leftist gripes. Aside from this book, Teacher Indoctrination into Your Beliefs is provided in a costly one-day seminar by a company called Math Wholeness at a district cost of $29,000 that all district math teachers were required to attend, which is just more of the same crap. I'm sure that you feel guidance is needed for non-woke teachers that need a little nudge. Lessons like these introduce conflict, discontent, and confusion into kids' heads, which can only create chaos at home for parents who don't see the world as you do and who understand the cultural rot in our country and public schools.
Okay. No one else has signed up on the sheet at this time, and do not see Mr. Bailey in attendance or online. And I don't see anyone else new who recently joined. So as such, we will close public comments at this time and move on to item 8, our board reports. Starting with 8.1, review of the board calendar. Today is November 14th, 6 p.m. We have a regular Board of Education meeting, immediately followed by a closed session. About November 21st at 6 p.m., we have a financial stability and efficiency workshop meeting on the 22-23 technology department update and review of district technology plan. And immediately following, we have a closed session. On Monday, November 28th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting, immediately followed by a closed session. Monday, December 12th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting, and then we have a college and career readiness workshop meeting, panorama results, and student attendance. And then on Monday, December 19th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting, followed by financial stability and efficiency readiness workshop, other post-employment benefits review, which is tentative at this point. Let's move on to 8.2, our board committee reports. 8.2.1, life readiness through college and career preparation. Ms. Deal.
Thank you. So we typically meet right before this meeting, but we actually met last week just for schedule purposes. So we actually did a couple things. The first thing is we reviewed policy 5722. So this policy addresses school-sponsored publications and productions. But if you go into it more, it has about 9 pages worth of instructions. Essentially, this policy requires us to determine whether we are establish ourselves either as a public forum or a non-public forum. And since that is, has larger implications for the district, we felt that it would be, that we should bring it to the committee of the whole. So the plan is that I believe that we should be reviewing and talking about this policy sometime in December, at a December meeting, and we will actually have, I think one of our lawyers will be there to answer any questions for us if we have any. We also talked a little bit about doing the specialty school survey. So we are looking to see if there's any interest with our district families that looking at maybe some specialty schools that we could offer. So that will actually, that survey is going to go out to families probably in January, so after the holidays. And we're gonna look at gauging interest in Spanish immersion, an art school, something that focuses on CTE, and then possibly like a middle school project-based learning, kind of a feeder into DAC. So that's gonna go out, so we can kind of see if that's something that families in the district might be interested in. And then we talked about panorama survey results. So we reviewed those. We will actually be having a workshop on December 12th, review those with the board. We'll also be talking about some of our attendance rates. There are some areas where we need to work on increasing our attendance rates. So we'll talk about that more at that workshop. Any questions or anything you want us to talk about or bring to our next committee meeting?
Any questions? I had one,
Okay.
regarding the survey going out to families about specialty schools. Do we have any plans or ability to reach out to those who open enroll out? Because you know, a lot of the families open enroll out are going to some of those specialty schools at MPS.
Yep.
And so it'd be interesting to know if they would have specific interest in a particular school that might help encourage bring those families back to our district. So
We've discussed that in finance as well, so we should team up.
All
do you
right.
have a response, Aaron?
Yeah, just a quick comment on that, and I talked to Deidre as well about that. We were looking at doing kind of more of a different outreach this time, but starting with the survey and then hosting different events in the community and like
Okay.
evening sessions. So trying to target families, both all families in the district, kind of as Amy suggested, with just getting more information, but then also trying to work with families who are open rolled out to then go, you live in Jefferson's neighborhood, we'd like for you to attend an, open house evening event
Mhm.
where we can hear more from the people that live in the community too. So a little bit different than what we did a few years ago, but trying to reach out that way as well. So.
Okay, good. I just want to see that obviously that is one thing that we try to keep track of and target. So having a means to reach, because obviously they're not in our district family email
Right.
list.
Right.
If they're not attending us as a district family. So I
Yeah.
just want to make sure we're also taking that into account. Mr. Kaiser?
I'm on the committee, but something that a point that I'd like to see is, can we get an update on our Deeper Learning Virtual Academy? and How that's going?
Oh, right. Mhm. Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Steele. We'll move on to 8.2.2, communications and community relations. Mr. Sikich.
Mr. President, I do not have a report at this time, but at our next scheduled meeting on the 28th, I will be presenting.
Very good. All right, well, then we'll move on to 8.3, board member reports of community events. Is there any community events people attended recently that they would like to make a report on?
I do have one. I didn't actually attend this, but I'm still gonna give a shout out. I did get someone who sent me into just praising basically our central athletic department and booster club. So she said, hosting the level 4 football playoff game Friday night, 2 huge crowds and teams coming to our stadium. Shout out to the central athletic department and booster club for stepping up and providing a great experience for those fans and teams. The concessions building was empty. We had already moved everything out of the building and into the high schools. For fall, because they were using it for fall, those sports were over. We had to move tons of items, order a ton more, find volunteers to have quality run concessions, and they were able to do it. So shout out to Central Athletic Department and Booster Club.
Excellent. Mr. Sickich?
I guess I would call this community events because our Southwest now doesn't really know that West Dallas schools exist.
Right.
And therefore there's no sports coverage.
Mhm.
I think it sports a little bit.
Mhm.
I would like to give a shout out to our West Dallas Wave, our co-op team, diver Courtney Neuendorf. She won the conference, qualified for state, and Saturday took 10th in the state. So congratulations to her.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Jeff. And definitely a shout out to our athletes. Unfortunately, don't get as much coverage as they should. Anyone else? Mr. Becker?
Friday, I was able to attend the Irving Veterans Day event. It was really nice. They had a couple speakers. They had a former Marine come in and he had a few words for the students. It was good. Nice educational opportunity for the kids. We also had an Army reservist. My dad had a prior engagement, so I wasn't able to drag him along and have him sit up with the rest, but it was a really nice event. And again, my dad as a vet was very happy to hear that the schools are doing them. So that was a nice perception versus reality as he acknowledged it. So that was really good.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? I just want to note that my wife and my mother-in-law and my daughter and son all went to the Nathan Hale vendor
the arts and
fair that they had, and found some really interesting and fun Christmas ornaments that will be on our tree this year. So it was yeah, it was a lot of fun and it was a good event. So I didn't attend myself, but everyone else in my family did. And I said it was great.
Was that by the Hale PTA?
Yeah, the
National Honor Society, I think, has a lot to do
Yeah,
with it too.
PTSA runs it, but then Honor Society and Friends of Music, kind of like they do concessions. So it's kind of like PTSA signs it up, but then a bunch of other groups come in.
Yep,
and
help to
concessions
run
and
it
all
and
that,
stuff.
but I was not able to make it. I had to work, but I heard that it was packed.
I was
so-
there and it was packed by 20 after 9 and it opened at 9 and it was, you couldn't find parking spots. Like
Oh,
it
wow.
was elbow to elbow in there. It was awesome. There was a lot. It was fun. It was really nice.
All right, anything else? Otherwise, all right, I'll move on to 8.4, which is our updates and information for me. So just an update on our superintendent search. So we had over this last week, starting actually back on the 10th on Saturday, our focus group meetings that were held with community members, parents, staff, and students. And so those were all, some were in person, some were virtual. And part of that feedback we have already seen as a board, and we're going to be discussing in our closed session later this evening as we finalize the profile of our next superintendent, which will be included and incorporated into the posting, which should be going live this week. So that is kind of the update for that. And then that will be obviously posted for a certain number of weeks. And then we'll start the next phase, which will be the evaluation process for the applications and then first round interviews. And we'll have further updates of that as we get closer. But that is all that I have for updates and information. So we'll move on to item 9, our consent agenda for this evening. We have item 9.1, which is the approval of minutes from our regular Board of Education meeting on October 24th and our special Board of Education meeting on October 31st. We have our 9.2, our employment summary, item 9.3, our supplementary contracts. Does anyone need anything separated out? If not, look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes. Let's move on to item 10, our action items for this evening. Starting with 10.1, approve new co-op high school athletic teams board policy as a first reading. Ms. Strasser, I believe, is here.
It's a little different scenery. All right, good evening, everyone. I am here on behalf of our Recreation and Community Services Committee with a first reading of proposed board policy. And this policy is being created to give the superintendent authority to create co-op teams when needed, when our 2 high schools. So the current process is first looking at the minimum participation numbers at the several levels. And when obviously they're unable to sustain those numbers, especially the varsity level, we look for them to co-op. We hope that right now it's like an internal policy that it needs to be mutually beneficial. But this policy would be in place if that mutual benefit is not seen by both programs. So that would then give the superintendent the authority to enforce or implement a co-op in the preceding year. Because the one thing we wanted to make sure we give consideration to is, this is where it gets a little tricky, WIAA. We would have to follow their timelines. So we would want to do that in a manner that does not create any type of penalties against our athletes for playoff. We don't want any playoff ramifications.
Shelley, is the
Yep.
language specific to superintendent or superintendent or designate?
Right now, we have it specific to superintendent.
Just wondering.
Yep.
It's a good point, Mr. Sikich. I know that we recently did modify some of our policies to include a designee. I don't know if there's anything specific with this that would require it to be specifically the superintendent, but it might be something to consider for the second reading as a possible addendum to that. Oh, Dr. Lexman has his hand up and he's waiting. He has something to say about this.
Go ahead.
Right, thank you. Yeah, thanks for letting me jump in and catching my hand waving. So in the bylaws and the definitions, superintendent means superintendent or designee. So it's already kind of understood. So that's an all, covers all policies. But I want to be clear that the language in this particular policy, which I support, I think this makes all the sense in the world to make sure the maximum number of students that want to participate in athletics can, but it really directs the superintendent to create a co-op. So it's that at the point at which, we can't agree to do it, it will happen as a result of the superintendent then directing it. But I very much support this, right? The more kids that participate in things beyond the normal kind of curriculum, the better. And so we should have something like this in place to make sure it happens.
Very
And,
good. So the-
just one other point, the other thing this policy will do is incorporate a kind of freestanding rule that we had in terms of delineating what the minimum participation requirements are. Now this will merge those two together.
Any other questions, comments about this first reading? Again, it'll come back around for second reading. If not, I look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we'll move on to 10.2, approve updated board policy 8310 as a second reading, and that is Dr. Lexman.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is the second reading. So a month ago, we had the first reading. No questions have come up since that time. So this is a set of clarifications in the public records policy that Neola advised. And so it's in front of the board again this evening as the second reading for the final approval.
Okay, does anyone have any questions on that? None, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute things that just happen to pop into your head in between the sentences? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. All right, so now we're going to take a 5-minute break to break down as we're going to move into closed session. So we are in recess. I look for a motion to move back into open session.
Motion to reconvene into open session.
Second.
All right, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Ms. Deal,
Yes.
Mr. Sikich,
Present.
Mr. Keller,
Oh, here.
Mrs. Carr is excused, Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Mr. Burns,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
President Lee.
Yes. All right, so we just had a very productive closed session meeting, and so we have some action to take on that.
All right, so I'm gonna make a motion to accept the recommendations for our superintendent profile as discussed in closed session and with the recommended changes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. I look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I said it.
Okay. It's like,
You didn't even
mine
get it.
doesn't count. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.